Hey, everyone, welcome back to Yusuf Reacts AA, the channel where we dive deep into your favorite superhero movies. Today, we're taking a trip back to 1980 to talk about one of the most iconic superhero films of all time, Superman. Directed by Richard Lester, is the epic sequel to the 1978 classic Superman, the movie. Picking up where the first film left off, this movie raises the stakes and introduces us to some of Superman's most formidable foes. First off, let's talk about the plot. Superman follows Clark Kent, played by the ever-charming Christopher Reeve, as he faces not one, not two, but three superpowered villains from his home planet of Krypton. General Zod, Ursa, and Non, brilliantly portrayed by Terence Stamp, Sarah Douglas, and Jack O'Halloran, escape from the Phantom Zone and threaten to take over Earth. Their plan? To conquer Earth and make humanity kneel before Zod. This sets up an epic showdown between Superman and these new adversaries, all while he grapples with his feelings for Lois Lane, played by the lovely Margot Kidder. One of the standout elements of Superman 2 is the character development. We see a more vulnerable side of Superman as he struggles with his dual identity and the sacrifices that come with being a hero. There's a particularly memorable scene where Clark gives up his powers to live a normal life with Lois, only to realize that the world needs Superman more than ever. The romance between Clark and Lois is beautifully portrayed, adding depth to the story and making Superman's journey even more compelling. Now, let's talk action. The special effects in Superman 2 were groundbreaking for their time. The battle scenes between Superman and the Kryptonian villains are intense and thrilling, even by today's standards. The final showdown in Metropolis is especially iconic. The destruction, the flying, the superhuman feats, it all comes together in a spectacular fashion that keeps you on the edge of your seat. Of course, we can't forget about the performances. Christopher Reeve once again proves why he's the definitive Superman, bringing both strength and vulnerability to the role. Terence Stamp's General Zod is menacing and unforgettable, delivering lines that have become legendary in the Superman lore. Superman 2 isn't without its behind-the-scenes drama. Originally directed by Richard Donner, who filmed a significant portion before being replaced by Richard Lester, the film underwent notable changes. This led to the release of Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut years later, which offered fans a glimpse of what might have been. Both versions have their merits, but the Lester version remains the theatrical release that captured the hearts of audiences worldwide. The Donner cut offers a different perspective and is worth checking out if you're a hardcore Superman fan. Superman agrees to sacrifice his powers to start a relationship with Lois Lane, unaware that three Kryptonian criminals he inadvertently released are conquering Earth. Picking up where Superman, the movie, left off, three criminals, General Zod, Terence Stamp, Ursa, Sarah Douglas, and Non, Jack O'Halloran from the planet Krypton are released from the Phantom Zone by a nuclear explosion in space. They descend upon Earth, where they could finally rule. Superman, meanwhile, is in love with Lois Lane, Margot Kidder, who finds out who he really is. Lex Luthor, Gene Hackman, escapes from prison and is determined to destroy Superman by joining forces with the three criminals. The meta-human heritage of the last son of Krypton is tested, as never before, when a series of misadventures unlocks in Superman a very human emotion: love. Superman's love for journalist Lois Lane, Margot Kidder, reaches a seemingly impossible peak, but requires the ultimate sacrifice as the incompatible molecular structure of Kal-El, Superman's birth name, and Lois would gravely complicate the inevitable bearing of children. Kal-El must be purged of his superpower to live as a mortal. Kal-El, despite the pleas of the spirit of his long-lost mother, willingly agrees, and now a normal human being, consummates his love for Lois, a decision that dooms the Earth, as three criminals from Krypton, freed from their extra-dimensional prison, lay waste to the planet in a path of conquest, aided by the planet's most arrogant criminal, Lex Luthor, who intends to smoke out Superman for his destruction unaware, as he is of the Man of Steel's helplessness, a condition that only one last hope can rectify. A group of terrorists seize the Eiffel Tower and threaten Paris with a hydrogen bomb if the French government does not meet their demands. Superman immediately heads to Paris, where he launches the elevator carrying the bomb into outer space before it can detonate. Unfortunately, when the bomb explodes, it disintegrates the Phantom Zone, where three Kryptonian criminals, General Zod Terence Stamp, Ursa Sarah Douglas, and Non-Jack O'Halloran, who had been imprisoned years before by Jor-El. Immediately, the three criminals, led by the psychopathic General Zod, head to Earth with the intention of enslaving the people Superman protects. The Man of Steel, however, is unaware of their arrival, and is forced to sacrifice his powers for a life with Lois Lane. When he finds out about Zod and his companions, Superman returns to the Fortress of Solitude to regain his powers and confront the horrible Kryptonian criminals on his terms. Can Superman defeat the three villains who are armed with identical powers to his own? Prior to the destruction of Krypton, the criminals General Zod, Ursa and Non disable a security guard at a crystalline matrix table. The General removes a red spire from the table and destroys it. The thunderclap as the piece is shattered resonates through the city and sets off a trap that ensnares the three brigands. The Red Spire's destruction is clearly an act of treason, and for this and other crimes they are sentenced by Jor-El and the Krypton Council to banishment into the Phantom Zone. On Earth, in the present day, Clark Kent arrives at the Daily Planet for work. He talks to his editor, Perry White, who's working on the latest cover story. Kent asks Perry what's going on, and Perry tells him a small group of terrorists are holding hostages at the top of the Eiffel Tower in Paris and are threatening to detonate a hydrogen bomb. Perry had sent his ace reporter, Lois Lane, to Paris on a Concorde jet to get the story. Kent leaves the planet building, ducks into an alley, and transforms into Superman, flying off to Paris. At the Eiffel Tower, on the bottom of the elevator that brings the hostages down from the top, when a French commando team determines the hostages are safe, and they believe the terrorists have taken the bomb out of the elevator, they cut the power and destroy the chain drive. The elevator plummets, taking the bomb and Lois with it. Superman arrives and stops the car, helping Lois off. He then athletes the car out into space, past the moon, where it explodes. The Phantom Zone is nearby and cracked by the shockwave. The three criminals are freed, finding themselves with superpowers granted by the yellow light of Earth's sun. After attacking human astronauts on the moon and the small town of East Houston, Idaho, the three travel to the White House and force the President of the United States to surrender to Zod on behalf of the entire planet during an international television broadcast. When the President warns Zod that Superman will stop them, Zod announces his demand for Superman to come and kneel before Zod. Prior to Zod's arrival, Clark Kent and Lois Lane are sent on assignment for the Daily Planet to Niagara Falls. Lois becomes suspicious that Clark is Superman and tries to lure him into revealing his identity by throwing herself into the Niagara River Gorge downstream. But Clark manages to save her with subtle use of his powers. That night, Clark accidentally reaches into the room's fireplace to recover his glasses after he trips. When Lois discovers his hand isn't the slightest burnt, Clark is forced to admit he is Superman. Superman takes her to his Fortress of Solitude near the North Pole and shows her the traces of his past, stored in the energy crystals of the fortress, one of which is the green crystal that created the fortress, and opens Superman's contact with his long-deceased parents. Lois misplaces the green crystal under her purse. Superman, talking to a hologram of his mother, Lara, decides to undergo a transformation too. make himself human by exposing himself to the red Kryptonian sunlight to become romantically closer to Lois, despite Lara's warnings. The process destroys many of the energy crystals, except the green crystal, lying a considerable distance away. After spending the night together, the two return to populated areas by conventional means. In a remote truck stop, Clark becomes the target of a brash, bullying trucker who beats him up. Clark realizes he's just as vulnerable as a human, shocked by the sight of his own blood. Suddenly, he and Lois see a live broadcast of Zod with the US president, demanding that Superman reveal himself and kneel to Zod. Realizing that humanity cannot fight Zod themselves, Clark decides to return to the fortress to try to reverse the transformation. His hike to the fortress is nearly impossible, and when he arrives, he admits to his father that he made a grave mistake, and that his adopted homeworld is in more danger than ever. As he's ready to give up, he notices the green crystal lying nearby. Lex Luthor, who has managed to escape from jail with Eve Teschmacher's assistance, has tracked down the fortress using an alpha wave detector, and infiltrated the fortress before Superman and Lois arrived. Learning from the crystal of Superman's mother, of Superman's connection to Jor-El and of General Zod, he traces Zod to Washington, D.C., and offers to lead Zod to Jor-El's son in exchange for control of Australia. Accepting his offer, the three Kryptonians are directed by Luthor to the offices of the Daily Planet, where they abduct Lois. Though Zod is initially disappointed, Luthor convinces him that any threat to Lois will bring Superman to her aid. Superman arrives, after having reversed his transformation process, and attempts to fight the three. The battle wages over much of Metropolis, with Superman courageously holding his own. Until Zod realizes Superman cares for the innocent humans and take advantage of this weakness. To protect Metropolis, Superman flies off in retreat. Zod declares his victory, but Luthor scoffs until he reveals that he knows the location of the Fortress of Solitude. Zod, Ursa, and Non fly to the Arctic, taking Luthor and Lois with them. At the fortress, Superman attempts to lay one last trap to stop Zod, but fails and stops his fight with the three when they threaten to kill Lois. Knowing that the three Kryptonians pose a threat to the entire world, Luthor listens as Superman tells him to try and trick them all into the crystal chamber that will transform them into humans. Zod catches on and forces Superman to enter the chamber himself. Luthor himself initiates the process by placing the green crystal in the remaining control panel. While Superman is in the transformation chamber, the rest of the fortress is bathed in red light. Zod demands that Superman kneel to him and take his hand. Superman slowly crushes Zod's hand in his and flings him into a pit. Luthor realizes that Superman had reversed the power of the chamber to protect him and transform the criminals. Non, unable to fly, falls into the pit and Lois punches Ursa, who suffers the same fate as her comrades. Superman returns Luthor to the authorities, despite the criminals' pleas that he was in on his plan. Superman returns Lois to her home. At the Daily Planet the following day, Superman as Clark kisses Lois. Using his telepathic abilities to wipe Lois' mind of all the events surrounding Zod's arrival on Earth, including her knowledge that Clark and Superman are the same person. At the truck stop where he was beaten up by the bullying driver, Clark takes revenge on the bullying truck driver who assaulted him. Superman restores the damage done by Zod, and as he replaces the flag on top of the White House, promises the president to never again abandon his duty. This is the best of the Superman movies because of the three villains, played by Terence Stamp, Sarah Douglas, and Jack O'Halloran. Those three are so good, particularly Stamp, that they make this easily the most memorable of the four films. The scenes with them on the moon, their first encounter on Earth, and their climactic fight against Superman in the skies above Metropolis are all outstanding. Once again, Superman goes a little overboard in his romance to Lois Lane. Do you believe some reviewers are upset there weren't explicit sex scenes in the film? Hey, folks, it's just a comic book, and it's supposed to be innocent, clean fun. Sorry, that turns you off. For the rest of us, this is generally very enjoyable film from start to finish, with no real lulls. In conclusion, Superman 2 is a classic that stands the test of time. It delivers action, emotion, and a hero we can all look up to. Whether you're a longtime fan or a newcomer, this film is a must-watch in the superhero genre. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more superhero movie content. And let me know in the comments, what's your favorite scene from Superman 2? Until next time, keep flying high.